Sign up today for a 7-day free trial at alerts.chartguys.com. Hey everyone, hope you're having a good long holiday weekend, friends and family, or by yourself, which can be fun too. So we're going to look at a little bit of a market overview using the alert system, alerts.chartguys.com, to go over a little bit of what the space is looking like right now. Because over the last week and a half, we've had a signal that we've been looking at as a good entry point opportunity, and that has been the 15-minute oversold climax alert. So here's looking at Bitcoin on the 15-minute time frame, looking all the way back to April 12th, about 9 days ago. And we can see that for the most part, these oversold indicators are going off either before periods of small bounces and consolidation or hitting the bottom before the bounce gets going. So in general, the 15-minute oversold climax indicators have been a good entry point. And we're now noticing a little bit of a shift in that with the action that's going on today. So there's also something else that you can gather from visually looking at this data and looking back and historically backtesting to see what alerts are going well and which ones should be utilized. And this one we can see that when we have two signals, so when we see an initial 15-minute oversold climax, we get a short-term bounce, we see some sideways trading, and then we get another leg down, and it fires off again, still meeting those oversold conditions. So I can look at this chart and say, all right, if I want to be a more cautious trader and wait until it's a really good signal, I'm not going to act on them until I see two. If I see two oversold 15-minute climaxes in a 1 or 2 hour period, meaning we are oversold, we see a short-term bounce, and we get another leg down, whether it's bots triggering stops before the bounce gets going or whatever it may be, that's a signal where I can, again, shift the odds in my favor and say, okay, I'm going to be more conservative, be more picky with my trades, and enter on the second signal. So right now, Bitcoin just did that again. So it had its oversold climax. We saw a weak bounce attempt, short-term, cooled off RSI levels. It dumped to a lower low. And just like that, this alert just went off before recording this video. So that price was at 5,227. And here we are currently up at 5,256. So already a little bit of space off of that second alert. So that's one thing that I can gather from looking at this information. Another thing I want to point out is what's the shift that's going on right now in the market compared to Litecoin. So Litecoin's gotten crushed overnight. And let's look at Litecoin on the 4-hour time frame just to compare. That's the dump that we saw on the 4-hour chart right at oversold conditions. And comparing to what Bitcoin did, excuse me, Bitcoin's nowhere near 4-hour oversold. We did lose the 4-hour uptrend, but it's a much different picture. And Bitcoin's holding on a lot better. So if I'm looking back at the alerts on the 15-minute time frame for Litecoin and trying to look at some similarities, I can say, okay, in the past week and a half, the 15-minute oversold climax, whether it's the first one indicating the short-term temporary bounce or the second one indicating the longer-term bounce, these alerts have been good signals for entry points. So that's changing now. And I'm looking at this and saying, all right, well, if I entered at any point today, I would have been in the red. And the biggest clues that the signal should be moved on from, because again, these markets are always in cycles. We see certain indicators work well for a week or two, or even more if we're lucky. And then we see the market shift and we move on and find the next signal that's the best suiting for that environment. So we can see that Litecoin has been seeing these bounces just like Bitcoin in 15-minute oversold conditions, signaling the temporary bottom, and that's no longer the case. So what has changed? The first thing that I want to go and look at is LTC BTC. And I can look on the 4-hour time frame and say, well, that's our reason right there. Look at this base of support. And if we look at it on the daily time frame, it's just grinding multiple bottoms of support, and it's a descending triangle pattern with a touch of support, a lower high, a double bottom, a lower high, and then a bear break. So if we look at that on the shorter term time frame, it's 0.015, 151, 15, 151. So essentially 4 touches before the inevitable break. And we saw this morning on Litecoin, 15-minute RSIs get much more extreme with those bounces not following through. So just looking back at 4 a.m. this morning, Eastern time, we had this weak bounce attempt. It was a 15-minute bear flag, but that was the first signal that went off on Litecoin because the conditions with the volume and RSI levels and the other inputs was enough to signal the 15-minute oversold climax. So I can look at this 15-minute chart and say, all right, the RSI is already in the mid to low teens for Litecoin, and I look at Bitcoin at that same point in time, back at 4 a.m. this morning, and I can see that we weren't even oversold. So when I see that happen, as we know Bitcoin is the leader in this space, I can say, okay, if Bitcoin is not oversold yet and an individual name is already oversold, that tells me that individual name can see more extreme RSI levels than normal, because Bitcoin can still very easily continue pulling back to get to oversold conditions. And that's exactly what happened. So we had the bounce where we weren't even oversold on Bitcoin, and then we dropped down to the lower low, which triggered the volume or the oversold climax for Bitcoin. It did get oversold at that point, but by that point, Litecoin, the RSI had dropped all the way down to single digits. It was down at 7, and at the low of that candlestick, we were down around 5 or so. So always want to compare to Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin is not oversold, the individual name can see more extreme levels as Bitcoin continues to pull back. So we do now have this bounce on Bitcoin playing out, and so far we haven't seen enough that tells us the 15-minute RSI levels are a bad entry on Bitcoin at this point. Another shift that makes me more cautious on this short-term signal, the 15-minute oversold, would be the fact that Bitcoin has now lost the 4-hour uptrend. I would be much more comfortable entering 15-minute oversold conditions in a 4-hour uptrend than I would be on consolidation. So using the alert system, looking back historically, has this worked? Seeing shifts, noting, and it was the same thing with Ethereum, but to a lesser degree, where Ethereum's getting more oversold, more overextended comparative to Bitcoin. So bottom line is Bitcoin's still holding on well. The 15-minute oversold alerts are still potentially in play, but I can throw them out the window for Litecoin and Ethereum, seeing that they're getting to more extreme conditions. And in my opinion, that break of the LTC, BTC, very clear support level. Again, when you have support that is that clear with so many touches, a lot of traders are going to act on that. So whether it was people shorting Litecoin on that bear break, which is probably the biggest factor of what went on, but that is why the RSI levels are getting so extreme. So definitely worth keeping an eye on what is going on in this ever-shifting market environment. So let's now get to the regular old technical analysis. And Bitcoin on the daily time frame, we have the range that we're watching from the high and the low, and we set a lower high of 53.60, and now we're consolidating a little bit. And it did get a little choppy on the 4-hour time frame, just in the instance that we did lose the 4-hour uptrend. Let's see, where do we lose it? Back here. So we did lose the 4-hour uptrend with no follow through for the bears. Kept marching up. We ended up with a double top at 53.60. It was clear the bears were defending that support, and then we changed the trend just over last night. But that being said, the daily consolidation on Bitcoin has hardly even begun, and we still have the 12-period exponential support, which is right here. So this is a scenario where the bulls can still make a statement by holding the daily exponential support and by recovering from this shift in momentum. Because if the bears do not see follow through here, if we do not see continued lower highs and lower lows, we know that it is a very weak pullback for the bears, and the bulls are going to keep control on the daily time frame. So at this point, for the bears to make a statement, I need to see 49.01 break for a clear daily lower high and lower low, or I need to at least see the price drop down towards 5,000 to give us a clear equilibrium setup. Because right now it looks like an equilibrium might be forming with our high, low, lower high, and we would look for the higher low compared to 4,900. But again, we have hardly even pulled back at this point, so not very significant. So that's what I'm watching on Bitcoin, daily time frame for clarity, looking at Litecoin, which is a lot more beat up, as we know. And it's been showing us weakness for the last week, where Litecoin had the high of April 15th and couldn't break that level. And if I just look at Bitcoin to compare, high of April 15th, we got over that level day after day after day. So very clear that Litecoin started to lose momentum comparative to Bitcoin, and that was a clear lower high and lower low now. We are clearly still in a daily downtrend for Litecoin, looking for the weekly higher low to be established. And all that being said, remember Litecoin was the lead bull out of these names on the way up. And so now we're seeing the weekly consolidation. The bulls have a ton of space to work with, and we're just looking for a weekly higher low. So the long-term uptrend is just fine. The RSI rejected right around 70. It's cooling off, and we're going to look for the exponential supports to hold on a weekly higher low. So if for bulls that missed the Litecoin move, they are welcoming consolidation to look for a weekly higher low. But as far as the 4-hour time frame goes, we know that anything under 82.40 is just a lower high. We're going to be watching the 4-hour exponential resistances on this bounce attempt, and it's going to require a 4-hour trend change for us to be looking at any kind of shift in momentum. And this is also a scenario similar to Bitcoin where the bulls can make a statement here, because 74.95 breaking is a clear bear break below the lowest price we've seen in about two plus weeks. And if that's as low as we go and the bulls can recover from here into tomorrow and to start this week, that would be a bear break with a lack of follow through, which means zoom out and look for a flag. And that is a potential bull flag on the weekly time frame. It's enough of a pullback at this point that I would expect we need to tighten on the weekly time frame, where even if the bulls do shift momentum, I would be surprised to just see a continuation move to higher highs. But the bottom line is, if we don't get a lot of bear follow through under 74.50 or under 74.95, then the bulls are going to be making a statement as to defending that support. So pretty much the bears have to see a 4-hour lower high and lower low to start this week in order to get follow through below that daily support. So Ethereum is in the middle of those two as far as extremes go. I like the Ethereum daily setup the clearest for this equilibrium. So we have the high, the low of the pullback. Our lower high was set at 177.84, and now it's clearly time to consolidate and look for a higher low compared to 156. And if we get that higher low, then we're going to look for a bounce and a lower high compared to 177.84. So at this point, the bulls are looking to make a play based off of 156 support, anticipating that the bulls will be able to hold a higher low. I personally would like to see it get closer to that support, so the risk of the trade before getting stopped out would not be as significant. But Ethereum has my attention today and tomorrow to see if we get that nice higher low. And the 4-hour time frame here, a much more clear bear break than Bitcoin as well. And anything under 174.45 is just a lower high. But if we see the 4-hour trend change, we're going to be looking for our daily higher low in the equilibrium to form. And if we do indeed get an equilibrium, we're going to look for it to break sometime mid to later this coming week. Perhaps Wednesday through Friday is what we'll be looking at for a potential time of that break, but we'll take it one day at a time as always. So Ethereum has my attention. For bears, Litecoin, we're going to be watching. Again, I'd be cautious as a bear on Litecoin if not already in a position, because we are not seeing that much follow through below 74.95. And again, don't forget, Big Daddy Bitcoin still holding the daily exponential support. And if we are, I am blowing up this morning. If we are able to hold the exponential support, then we're going to be right there looking for continuation. And it's not a cup and handle pattern, textbook wise, but psychology wise, we have resistance, healthy consolidation, the inability to break resistance. And if it's a little daily bull flag here, that cup and handle pattern is, the psychology of that cup and handle pattern is potentially in play. Please silence all your cell phones. You guys are really distracting me. So we're going to look at XRP now. So XRP on the daily time frame is also looking at a tightening range. Where we are coming from is a much different setup. It's more choppy. It's not as clear. So if you give me the Ethereum chart and the XRP daily chart, I would easily choose Ethereum because I've seen that pattern 1,000 times and it's much more comfortable to play. The game plan is a little bit more clear as far as establishing a trade, but there is a range we can be using on XRP that's similar in the sense that we have our low, high of the bounce, and we are looking for a higher low compared to 312. So what's the 4-hour RSI look like? It's close to oversold. So if we were to get an oversold play on the 4-hour time frame off of that support for XRP of 312, that's my kind of bottom fishing play. So I like bottom fishing plays that are playing off of a clear support level and have oversold conditions heading into that support level, because the oversold conditions increases the odds that that support level is going to hold. So same thing, 4-hour time frame, we're looking for a bounce, exponential resistance. Anything under 331 is just a lower high. And a 4-hour trend change would be the indication that our daily higher low has been established, and we would then look for a bounce and a lower high compared to 349. ADA USDT has been sideways for a long time as well. This looks like weekly healthy consolidation to me. So again, we ran really hard for 6 weeks. There's no red flags at this point. Volume is declining on the consolidation. We're backtesting exponential support. The bulls hope it's support and hope it holds to form this higher low. And again, very healthy compared to the size of the move as to where we stand right now. So the daily chart has been red for a while. The daily RSI dropping down to the low 40s. The 4-hour RSI is down at 20. So anything under 7.7 is just a 4-hour lower high. We can see we're already rejecting from exponential resistance on the 4-hour time frame multiple times. So that's what we're watching as far as the key resistance to be going against. There's no clear support nearby. I'm looking down at the next level of 688. So this is the kind of setup where I know I'm looking for a weekly higher low to form. The weekly higher low will be formed when the daily trend changes. But if I want to act a little bit sooner and have higher risk or higher reward based on my trade, I'm going to be looking at a 4-hour trend change as the potential first indicator that our weekly higher low has formed. So if I'm looking to maintain a weekly uptrend and I want a position, I'm looking to try and get in and make a trade game plan. So just a very brief overview. And I just did this with the US marijuana stock sector this previous week because they were all in weekly uptrends and seeing pretty significant daily consolidation. And we were looking for entries and we were looking at oversold bounces on the daily time frame to give us weekly entries. But in this instance, let's just say we bounce, we reject from 4-hour exponential resistance, we come down and set a higher low and a higher high. And if I make my bullish entry on that higher low and higher high, my game plan might be to initially sell half of my position with perhaps 1% profit to lock it in quickly, to lower my break-even point on the trade by 1%, and then just put a stop loss for the rest of that position below what our recent low was. And what that does is it gives me a very low-risk trade. The reward is that the weekly higher low has been established, and we then see multiple days of follow-through for the bulls. And the risk, because I lowered my cost basis 1% from my entry, and let's just get a visual going here. So we bounce, we reject from resistance, we pull back, we form a higher low, and then we change the 4-hour trend. I enter on this resistance level breaking. So that's my break-even point for the entry. I sell on some of the bull follow-through to lower my cost basis from here break-even down to about here break-even, and it might end up being a small loss if we were to continue down, but again, it limits that risk a lot. And the reward is nailing the weekly higher low, and the risk is very small. So that is a setup that I look for when I know the longer term pattern is favoring the bulls. The shorter term patterns are favoring the bears, but I'm looking for an entry for that momentum shift back to the longer term pattern where the bulls have the favor. And we'll wrap it up here with Binance because Binance is making waves in the cryptocurrency space. It continues to be a shining star for months in a row. New all-time highs. First major coin to hit all-time highs since the top in 2018. Very notable. The top is set for now. We are consolidating. We're looking for a daily higher low to form. We're watching 12-period exponential support, and we're watching oversold conditions. Hourly oversold RSI for the first time coming off of a bull move, specifically all-time highs, is a good entry opportunity for a quick flip. So we got hourly RSI just under 30 down here at 2250, and we bounced up to 2334, and that is a solid 3.5% bounce in just an hour. So again, that's just a rule of thumb that you're going to see play out more often than not, and the bulls haven't changed any trends or anything, but it's just a short-term oversold bounce that has good odds of playing out. So we're looking for a change in the 4-hour trend to indicate our daily higher low has been established on Binance. And if we lose the daily uptrend, which has happened a couple times with no follow through, and news has been a reason, Binance has a lot going on, and news has been a reason that these daily bear breaks have been disregarded multiple times. You can see on the weekly time frame, a couple times it's looked like, all right, it's time for weekly consolidation here, and then we get a new leg up. So just be aware that we have to see follow through for the bears. And I'm watching at this point for a bear cross of the 12 and 26 period exponential here because we can see it's been in an uptrend for 2.5 months. So if we see these cross bearish, which is nowhere near happening, but if it were to happen, that would be a shift that would be notable from such a bullish environment. So hope you're all well. Hope you have a great holiday. And we'll continue to monitor which alerts are giving the best entry opportunities. Still not giving up on the Bitcoin 15-minute oversold climax because it is still in play. And we can see that it has given short-term bounces here that are following through to a degree that gives enough to allow us to protect the trade rather than being a falling knife like Litecoin was on its 15-minute signals. And now we're going to see how are the ETH and LTC names going to respond to Bitcoin, who is clearly holding up much stronger? So most important thing for me is Bitcoin. Can we hold the 12-period exponential support? If we can, that remains pretty darn bullish for me, looking at the potential of breaking multiple resistances on one bull move. And we'll check back in if that does indeed play out. So Equilibrium Watch on ETH, top of my list as well. Thanks again, do good things, and we'll see you soon. So picking back up on adventure time, heading up the East Coast from Florida. It is August, was August 5 years ago, and destination was the Northeast. I believe I was going to a friend's wedding. I grew up in Massachusetts, and the foliage was about to be popping off in New England, so heading back up for there and making my way along the coast as we go with some beautiful flowers. Thought this was a cool shot of the diversity. This was all in my campsite, all the different kinds of algae and moss and lichen and cool different colors, cool different shapes, orange, blues, purples, teals, greens, all breaking down wood. And one of my favorite facts is that trees were around before fungi, and I might be getting it wrong. It's either the bacteria that break down trees or the fungi that break down trees didn't exist when trees were thriving. And so trees would fall and die, and then they would just lay there, and nothing was breaking them down and turning them into soil. So certainly a different kind of world back then. This giant wasp took out a giant cicada right in front of my face as I was walking down the trail. I believe this is in Kentucky at this point. I like bugs. These are furnaces from the 1700s for metalworking. Just these big stone structures that allow the heat to get trapped, to get hot enough to be able to work with metals. So that was pretty cool. This is in, oh man, what is the name of this? Fort Fredericks. I should have checked beforehand, but Fort Frederickson, something along those lines. I think it's Virginia. I like the stuff from the 1800s. I grew up with my grandparents living in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of the famous Civil War battle, and I've been going there. I've been there 30, 40 times in my life or more. And so we got all that history, all the battlefield tours, the ghost walks, and all of that stuff. So it definitely still interests me. But a cool big old fort with big walls still around 250 years later or so. So this was just, I think it's a state park, and I was just around, hanging around there, and I did go back up through Pennsylvania, and this is the front page of the Gettysburg Times, I believe it's what it's called. Local farmer finds mutant ear of corn. The happy guy, there's his 15 minutes of fame, Ben Clunk. 3-headed ear of corn, front page of the newspaper. It's a simpler place. Then I hopped on the AT trail just for a couple nights. There's your shelter. And heading up now as the leaves were continually changing to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, my old stomping grounds. That's where my dad used to originally take us camping, and that's where I started to fall in love with nature. If you have children, take your children camping in a tent. RVs are cool, but take your children camping in a tent. It will probably change their life. And I'm 30 years old, and I can think back 25 to 20 years ago and how much of an impact that had on me and how it sparked my love for camping and how I then used that passion to road trip around the country and experience all these things because I was comfortable doing so, because I had an adult show me the way and show me how to do these things. And if I had never camped, it's probably, if you never camp and you're all of a sudden 30 years old, it's probably hard to get comfortable and to get into doing it consistently. Take your kids camping, even if it's in the backyard. It's an adventure. It's fun. You can bond and roast s'mores and have a fire. Teach your kid how to make a fire. All good stuff. That's the advice for today. We'll see you next time.